Welcome to episode 388 of the Postal Hub podcast. I'm Ian Kerr. It's part 2 of our bumper end of year podcast special thing that we're doing, and I've got 4 guest speakers for you this episode. First up is Jonathan Bouaziz from Kardinal. We're going to talk about cross-border parcel fees and a little bit more. Then we've got Peter Balfour from imageHOLDERS. We're going to talk about helping customers adopt self-service in the post office. A very interesting topic. Amanda Martinez from HubBox will be joining us as well. We'll talk about out-of-home delivery and the checkout experience. And I'm also going to be joined by Dr. Clemens Beckman from Greenplan. That's Greenplan. And we're going to talk about route optimization, obviously, and a little bit more than just route optimization. Anyway, let's get straight into it. First up, we've got Jonathan Bouaziz from Kardinal. Joining me on the line is Jonathan Bouaziz. Jonathan is co-CEO at Kardinal. Jonathan, welcome back.
Thank you, Ian.
We are sort of looking forward in this conversation. Well, what's going to happen in 2026? Now, you've identified a big development that's really only just in the last few weeks and months sort of broken out in Europe when it comes to cross-border parcels. Just tell us a little bit about what this topic is and why you think it's important.
Thank you for receiving me first. And I think that 2026 is going to be a crazy year in all sense because it's not going to be a challenging year like we all knew in the 2022. It's going to be a structural breakpoint from my point of view because of the taxes. We know that the European countries are putting more taxes from Chinese parcels, from social pressure. We know that it's going to be really challenging, and the rising costs regarding the subcontractors, regarding the real estate, everything's going to cost more, and you'll have to deliver better with less volumes. So I think it's going to be a really challenging year for most of the parcel delivery players.
So the news just announced recently was that there'll be a $3 fee applied to parcels, if I've got it correctly, parcels from outside the EU entering the EU. Do you think this is going to have a big impact, or customers just say, I don't care, €3, I'll cop that?
When you're talking about €3, it might seem very little. You cannot buy anything. You can buy like 2 cans of Coke, something like that. But it's not. It's nothing. But when you see the different products that customers are buying from China, they can buy cables, cheap products that can cost like $1, $2, and if you put an additional €3 on top of this, it's gonna be really they're gonna think twice about if they buy it or not. And I think that's gonna have a huge impact on the number of parcels. Instead of buying those products, they won't, and so the volumes will be lower. Obviously, this is my point of view here.
I think we'll also see, at the risk of me editorializing here a little bit, an acceleration in how those Chinese e-commerce players adapt to this. I mean, if they may say, well, we're going to move more warehouses to inside the EU and look at it that way. I mean, I don't know what impact that would have on their cost base if it means that then they're no longer able to operate as a super low cost e-commerce company. But Chinese e-commerce companies have shown their ability to adapt. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that they always shown their ability to adapt, for sure. Of course, it's going to have an impact. It's going to have an impact on the cost. If they move the warehouses in Europe, they will have obviously to store the products, and you have a lot of products, as you know, and so I think it's gonna have a cost. Maybe it's going to be less than the €3 per parcel because they will be able to ship from Europe. But I think that some of them will, depending on the product, some of them will keep the products in China and just absorb the costs, or find ways to not pay those €3. So I think it's going to be a challenging year to see how they will adapt, how they will use the rules to make the most of it. But obviously, it will have an impact.
Now, you mentioned something about rising costs and costs in the last mile. What do you think that's going to mean for the delivery world in 2026?
Um, this is why I said it's 2026 going to be a structural breakpoint because in the last few years, what we've seen since the COVID arrived is that most of the parcel delivery players invested a lot in the network, building warehouses, delivery hub, to um, to keep up with the new, this new pace of delivery, and so I think that it's going to be really challenging, but because now they will have to adapt their structure, their capex to this new to this yes this new environment. Because we are talking about the 3 euros, maybe people will say that it's it's anecdotal, and so we don't really care about the 3 euros. But I think it's more about where we are going as in Europe. We are putting more taxes. It will cost more. The subcontractors keep the cost keep rising. And it's not only in Europe. You can see like Canada Post results. You can see a lot of parcel delivery players just struggling with this model. So I think they don't have the choice to reinvent themselves, to reinvent how they are delivering, and try to to be better than the others, and that's the only way that they can make money on it.
You mentioned social pressures. What did you mean by that when you refer to social pressures?
Yeah, social pressures, because I think that's what's really crazy is that when you're all the interviews of the customers, they are all requiring green deliveries, being delivery having deliveries like completely CO2 free. Um, but at the same time, they are asking for faster deliveries or more convenient deliveries. I would say that in Europe, there are, the lockers is a big thing, but when you are talking about, the US, those markets, it's really not something that expanding that fast comparing to Europe. Um, but I would say that they are asking for faster deliveries. I would say CO2 zero CO2 emissions, but at the same time they don't want to pay the price. They say that they don't agree. Now when you see that the delivery is free, you don't want to pay, and even €1, €2. So the e-commerce has to absorb those costs, and to absorb those costs, they need to increase the price. And so I think this is why it's going to be really challenging, where you're going to ask the customers, do you prefer having like a green delivery, or you prefer having like a faster delivery, or you prefer having like a zero cost delivery? And depending on those choices, they will just go through one delivery player instead of the other.
And what you've hit upon there is this concept of the attitude behavior gap. And we certainly see it in green delivery. In fact, I did a very interesting podcast with Kathleen Collier. I've probably not pronounced that exactly right. Back last year, I'll put a link to it on the episode page where we talked about the attitude behavior. People want green delivery, but if it's going to be free and not green, they'll take it. There's probably an education there that needs to happen from the last mile world or the e-commerce world more broadly for customers to understand truly what the environmental cost is of their buying behaviors. A complex topic, though, that we might not get bogged down in today. Just before we finish up, Jonathan, you mentioned something else when we were talking about what did you say? You said that we're moving from it being from an operational problem to a strategic one. Is that what you said? So what did you mean by that?
Yeah, but just to come back on the last topic, because you mentioned about the different interviews of the customers. It's like they really they want to buy like French clothes or French products, but at the same time they don't agree to pay the price. So this is why they want to buy, but they want to buy cheaper, and they won't say what would be and they don't want to see the impact of those of this yes, buying attitude.
We're at risk of disappearing down a rabbit hole here, but I think there's a lot more for us to discuss when it comes to the role that low cost e-commerce players have in the e-commerce industry. It's beyond just delivery. It goes to things like consumer protections. We've seen that in France in the last couple of months. There's been a lot of discussion about consumer protections. It's about how we deal with returns. It's also about the usability of these products. I mean, I heard some disturbing statistics about the volume of not quick commerce, of low-cost commerce items that are never used and go straight into landfill. There is definitely an environmental cost to this. And I know I've ranted and raved about this in the past, and maybe I'm a lone voice on this, but I certainly think there's a reckoning that has to come, and maybe it has to start with the consumer. I know that we've just said that there's the attitude-behaviour gap. How can consumers be better educated about this and to understand that if you buy something online that you can't use because it's broken, but it cost you $1, so it's not going to get returned, and then you chuck it straight into landfill or it goes into an incinerator or whatever it might be, that's not a great outcome on any level, let alone the environment. So if we put aside the environment for a moment, just talk about the what should we call it, the actual monetary cost and all that. Anyway, look, I'm about to rant and rave about something I'm not sure everybody wants to hear me rant and rave about, Jonathan. Maybe we should just come back to a question I tried to ask before, which is about the operational challenge and the strategic approach. So what are we getting at here when it comes to the potential fluctuations in cross-border e-commerce volumes because of these new fees that are applying to parcels coming to the EU, the growing costs relating to subcontractors and things like that? What can we look at when it comes to trying to come up with solutions that will stand up to whatever 2026 throws at us?
That's a great question, and I think that part of the answer is that over the last few years, parcel logistics has been living in a permanent state of tension. You had the explosion of e-commerce, you had the labor shortages, you had the strikes, the inflation, all the new environmental constraints, all those things, and now on top of that, you need to have the regulatory changes with the parcel fees and the end of de minimis exemptions. And what we see is that and that was striking when I was at the last conferences, most of the industry discussions focus on the symptoms. So the rising costs, the subcontractors' price increases, the service level degradation. But the real question behind that is why do why do some operators manage to absorb those shocks while others collapse under the same pressure, and what's the difference between them? What's the difference between player A and player B, and what are their decisions, and what make them different from one from the other? And I think that the problem, and we're always talking about optimization, and I'm the first to talk about optimization with Kardinal, of course, but I think it's no longer a question of optimization, it's a question about control. How do you control the decision you are making? And so I think that if you want to move, and the game changer will be to move from an operational problem where you say, okay, we need to define how many drivers we're going to need, to a more strategic one. How do we plan? How do we anticipate? We don't think about. We think we need more routes, or we need less routes, or we need to review our pricing model. But now it's more about how we think the negotiation process, how we work with our subcontractors, what they will do. Is it the network is too complex? Okay, but now they would say the drivers are overloaded, and how we manage those things. And I think that this is a combination, between the strategic and the operational, where they are colliding. And this is exactly what we need to do, is moving from this operational problem to a more controlled one. What will happen if I lose my biggest customer? What will happen if I increase the cost by in this cohort? I will increase the cost by 5%, and you need to anticipate those questions. So this is why to answer your question, I think this is why we need to be more data-driven, control-driven, instead of trying to absorb the shocks with a reactive approach.
Jonathan, we've opened a can of worms. We're going to leave it open on the counter for the next little while. For people who want to find out more, though, about Kardinal, you've mentioned route optimization and managing resources and things like that. If people want to find out more about Kardinal and all that you have to offer, how can they get in contact with you and the team?
Yeah, so they can contact us on our website, but as you know, Cardinal is more than a route optimization solution. We support parcel delivery companies. It can be the negotiation with their unions to know how many drivers they will put on the field, what will be their workload to make sure they have a data-driven discussion. And we know it's really it's a struggle to anticipate those things and to have data-driven discussion. And it's not about reducing the number of people. It's more about make the company profitable and make that everyone can work decently with a certain amount of hours. So this is the kind of thing we provide, but also negotiation with the subcontractors, how to redefine the pricing, sectorization, tactical planning. This is all the topics that we tackle, from the strategic, tactical, and operational one. So they can contact us on our website. You have a lot of use cases and a lot of testimonial of customers that leverage our algorithms on a daily basis. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate.
And the website, I think, off the top of my head, is Kardinal.ai. Kardinal with a K.
Exactly.
Is that right? There you go.
Yeah.
Full marks for Ian for remembering. I'll put a link to the Kardinal website on the episode page on the postalhub.com. So you've got reference there if you want to go back and visit their website, find out more, and read about some of their case studies, etc. Thank you very much for joining us today, Jonathan. Jonathan Bouaziz, co-CEO at Kardinal. Thank you very much for joining us on the Postal Hub podcast today. I'm here with Peter Balfour from imageHOLDERS. Peter, we're going to talk a little bit about self-service in the post office or in wherever we can put in a self-service option for consumers. How can you change customer behaviour when it comes to self-service so you can help people, embrace self-service? What's your take on that?
I think it's a really good question. And you can sort of look at how other businesses have done it. And I think, Donald's is a great example of a business that automated overnight. They forced changing customer behavior by removing the counter and placing them with self-service kiosks. I think posts are more complex in terms of the services and the products they're offering. So I think it needs to be a more gradual transition. But I think the key is making sure that you have the right ratio of self-service machines to counters. It's no good having one kiosk if you've still got 7 counters, because as people, we like to talk to other people and we'll naturally migrate to an empty counter if we can, rather than use the machine. So I think the first thing is to make sure that your physical customer journey is orientated to encourage the customer to migrate towards a self-service use. Secondly, I think that you need to educate and support your customers in changing their behavior. So there's a transition phase where you have to greet your customers, show them the new technology you're using, and educate them and help them adapt. And I think once you've got that in process, then if the customer journey is easy, if it's better for the customer to use the self-service option, then I think they will naturally accept it and naturally adopt it. And I think this is where really, as a hardware manufacturer, our job is to make sure that the ergonomics, that the aesthetics are in place, that we've selected the right devices, that we've put them in the right place, that we've made the kiosk accessible for people with disabilities and partial sight. And if we get that right, then the key part, the final step, is making sure that the software side of the customer journey is easy to use for the customers.
And so this means then, when you're talking about how the post office works, you've got people behind the counter who are experts, who are able to do, I'm not going to say everything, but they're able to really help for those complex transactions. Whereas with a self-service, Is there a sweet spot, I suppose, with what you want to have going through a self-service terminal so that you've still got a great, well, you just said, the great customer experience. You've got people who want to use the self-service terminals when they come into the store?
Well, I think, first of all, that although all posts are facing similar problems, all posts are different in terms of the service and the products they provide to their customer. So the question is, are you going to automate all of those services and products, or are you going to focus on doing the simple and easy transactions and make that process quick? And I think that can be a difficult question for posts to answer. One of the advantages of digitalization and self-service and automation is that you can free up your staff from dealing with mundane routine procedures to helping customers focus on more complex tasks. So it depends on the services and products that the post is offering. If you're a post office that's heavily diversified and you're providing financial transactions, financial services, insurance services, then I think that automating shipping, parcel drop-off, parcel collection frees up those staff to concentrate on engaging with those more high-value services and products. But that's not to say that a lot of those services can be automated. So I'm a huge believer that there's a huge potential for posts to provide government services, a vast range of government services, and everything from passport, driver license renewals, bill payments, vehicle insurance renewals. There's 101 things the post offices can provide. And we can digitalize and also make sure that those processes are biometrically secure and automate them so that they become fast and efficient for customers. And that can draw people back into the post offices and make post offices real community centers and valuable points for the people that live there.
And certainly a lot of things we could talk about here, but we could probably talk for a couple of hours about that. But it's interesting what you just said about customizing the approach to self-service to make it work in a market, in a culture, and then also in the physical footprint that you've got in the post office network. Anyway, we won't go into too much more detail on that, but Peter, thanks for joining us today and having this discussion.
Thank you very much, Ian.
I'm here with Dr. Clemens Beckman from Greenplan. Route optimization. It's been around for a while, but we've got all these pressures on us now in the delivery world to reduce kilometres driven, reduce emissions, optimize the load in the back of the van. What are some of the things that you're seeing when delivery companies come to you? What are they really after? What are the things that they're chasing when they come to you? What are they trying to just squeeze more out of the lemon? What are they after?
Yeah, so the one thing is planning. The other thing is also what is happening the next day when the dispatchers have to execute the routes that we are calculating. And meanwhile, we have learned that it is quite important that we can also give the answer how the dispatching system that they are using is corresponding with our planning tool. Because what they really want also is that if something goes wrong the next day, that they have easy kind of information and handling options to repair it. One example, we have planned a route, and today time windows play an eminent role. A lot of ETAs are given to the final customers. So now our system gets an information from the TMS that at stop 5 on the route, we are already 18 minutes late. Or 20 minutes late roundabout. Then our system is calculating, is there a risk that a certain time window, a critical time window was violated later on the route? If that is the case, so we give back the information. What we are doing is we are calculating the new route with some real-time data for the, let's say, for the next shipments in a 1 hour time radius. And outside of that radius with forecasted traffic flows, because we are working with this traffic flow informations. Then we recalculate the route very precisely, and if there is then a time window violation, we give this information back, and the dispatcher can now decide how to handle it. Either the dispatcher can then ask our system, is there a possibility, for example, to change the stop sequence? And then by a change of the stop sequence, we can repair it and can say now at stop 9, for example, you are again in the time window, if it is a critical time window. The other alternative is just to call the customer, sorry, we are a little bit late. Yeah, is it okay that we come half an hour later today, for example? But this kind of interaction gives the customer much more the feeling that the planning is not only in theory good, but also works well the next day when it is executed.
And you mentioned the role of the dispatcher there, or communications with the driver. So how do the drivers react then? Because there is a human element to this.
Yeah.
So there is a human being driving the van or riding the motorcycle or whatever it might be. Yeah. What's the reaction from the drivers and the riders when it comes to making these ad hoc changes to their delivery route? Are they coping with it? Or are they being guided through it? How does it impact on them?
Good question. So it's very important that the different systems are working simultaneously. So the good thing is the driver should have some kind of driver app where he gets the routing for the next stops automatically calculated. And if there is a change now in the stop sequence, it's important that in the moment where the dispatcher decides that the sequence should be changed, that the driver gets an automated update about the stop sequence. Yeah, then it's quite okay. And we, as routing system, we are also taking into consideration the interests of the drivers, for example, that their working day should not be longer than X hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is part of the calculation, because this is also a time window violation. The driver also, according to, for example, in Germany, according to law, they are not allowed to work longer than 10 hours. Therefore, we have a very strict time window rule. Never prolong a route where the driver would be forced to work longer than 10 hours.
So these are, your rules, I suppose, for your network. So other nations will have a different kind of maximum work hours. It might be maximum kilometres. Yeah. It might be that that if you employ someone over a certain amount of time, that you're going to hit overtime, and so you're then impacting on your other costs. So you can feed in all of these factors.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's a big difference, for example, to make it very, very illustrative. A soft time window violation very often does not lead to any change. But the hard time window constraints, so means an article is for a production line and it has to be there at 12 o'clock because the production
critical.
Then any minute of violation of the time window is a very critical thing. And then surely our system sees this, because this time window violation is behind. So we get the information. It's a very hard constraint. We give our system a very hard penalty rule. For example, this time window is violated with 10,000 euros per minute. And then our system actually knows.
That sharpens your attention, doesn't it?
This sharpens the decision of our system, because our system is money driven, so to say, in the calculation. Yeah.
So much more we could talk about when it comes to route planning and costing and all those sorts of things, but we're not going to do it today. Another time, perhaps. Dr. Clemens Beckman, thanks for joining us on this podcast today.
Thank you.
I'm with Amanda Martinez from HubBox. Amanda, we're going to talk a bit about out-of-home delivery, a bit about checkout and things like that. HubBox is in a few different markets. What are you seeing when it comes to the options that consumers are presented with, and what consumers want to select when it comes to their delivery options?
Yeah, so I can speak to that from different markets that we're working in. So we started out in the US and the UK, but we're now expanding into Europe and working in the Nordics as well. And out-of-home adoption is very different amongst these different countries. So in the US and the UK, what you saw is that hardly any retailers had this option at checkout, or some of them would try to do an integration or try to build this feature in there, and then it just became outdated. They didn't maintain it, and eventually needed to work with a partner on that. So it was scarce at checkout at best. Now, I think we have over 2,000 integrations across the US and the UK. Some of those retailers are also enabled for their shipments into Europe, who have DCs in Europe. But when you look at France and the Nordics, what you see is not so much an absence at checkout as much, but something very rudimentary that was put into place to satisfy a need before there were really providers, or a provider like HubBox stepping into that space and doing it. So, for example, in France, you may see just a list of locations, and the user experience for that is they see just 10, maybe at best 20 locations, instead of a dynamic map where you're scrolling around and those locations are populating as you're maybe going to your home address or your work address. And then that person would have to copy and paste that address and go into a Google Maps to see where it is. So it's not a very user-friendly experience. In the Nordics, where you see a lot of pickup, a lot of times it's called, some people call it passive PUDO. For example, Ascendia calls it this. So this means that maybe the customer selects that they're going to pick it up, but then they get a notification later of where to pick it up. So they don't have that choice.
Right.
So instead of retailers saying, okay, we need help putting this in checkout, they're looking and saying, we need to provide a better experience at checkout. We need to replace these old options that are there and provide something more dynamic. So it is very different across markets.
There's almost a sense of what would Amazon do here as well, so that customers don't just shop at one store, and if they get a better experience on another store when it comes to delivery options, they will remember. I'm saying that as a statement. I should ask that. Do customers remember? Is that what's driving this to an extent? Like you mentioned, out-of-date data and a terrible user interface. Is that the feedback from consumers that they want better because they've seen better in other marketplaces or on other e-commerce retailers?
I think so. I mean, if you look at Amazon, if you look at Vinted or Zara, you see something a lot more dynamic and that fits with the rest of the website. But the flip side of that is if a customer interacts with this when it's first presented at checkout, maybe they use this site a lot. They order from a fashion brand a lot, and then all of a sudden this option is there, and they use it a few times. You see them more consistently using it as they get used to it. So say we onboard a retailer with pickup at checkout, and only in the UK, so rates are lower of adoption at checkout. Say they start at 8% or so of users choosing this over home delivery. Then what you see in 6 months' time is that rate goes up to 26% or even higher, because customers, once they start using it, they start using it even more. They build trust in it. The UX is designed to build this confidence in knowing where that location is and having a good feeling when they choose it, and that's confirmed.
But they also doing things like saving their delivery preferences, because this is one of the, speaking as an e-shopper myself, not that I'm a frequent e-shopper, but when I'm shopping online, I've already selected the option last time. I don't want to have to go through the list of options again. I know it sounds petty, but we talk about trying to have frictionless e-commerce. Mm-hmm. This has got to be part of it, right? Getting so that the system remembers it's me shopping, and I like to pick it up here, or I prefer home delivery, whatever it might be. Is that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things we're doing with this. One, we have a feature called Carry the Cookie, which means just reading the cookies on the site to know what has been selected before in checkout. So before you even open the map interface, that one is already there as the option. So you don't have to reselect it or open the map or do anything else. And then we're also playing around with how do you present this option before the cart. So say you're looking at an item, maybe there's something below that item that says, deliver to my Tesco shop, which is 2 minutes walking from me. And it's already showing what that price would be if you selected that. So it's kind of priming the customer to select that even before that it's in the cart.
We should go on and on about this. Maybe another time, Amanda, but people can probably go to HubBox, find out more about it. We'll put your email address down below.
Yeah.
We won't do that.
Yeah. It's www.hub-box.com.
Amanda Martinez, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ian.
Coming in 2026 on the Postal Hub podcast, Lynn Guzal, Chief Retail Officer at POS Malaysia, Eric Wilhelm from Qberts, Gordon Stewart from The Information Factory, Milos Zlatkovic from Miley Technologies, Jorn Speerts from Shiptimize, Peter Summers, Alan Barry, and many other luminaries and stars. Can you be a luminary and a star? Luminaries and or stars? Interesting people from the postal and delivery worlds will be joining us on the Postal Hub podcast in 2026. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of these interviews. Give the podcast a 5-star rating while you're over there subscribing. Remember to subscribe to the Postal Hub's email newsletter. Subscribe to the Daily Delivery Digest. And if you're a post office person, there's the Post Office Digest. What else? Well, you can email me at ian@thepostalhub.com if you have any questions, queries, or comments. I hope you're all having a bit of a rest after a massive 2025 peak season, and I look forward to your company next year, or this year if you're already listening to it next year, on the Postal Hub podcast.